New York, you know. So we are at the beginning of Paseo de Gracia, which is basically by La Plaza Catalunya, next to Las Ramblas, where everything happened. It's just tragic because Barcelona is such a beautiful city. I'm an expat here, and it's usually so fantastic just to live here that we were so blessed that we didn't have this type of terrorist attack before. We were kind of like left out of the community to learn that this is happening. We all are like completely alarmed and sad.
Diana, just describe to us what happened in the immediate aftermath. We were just looking at a bit of footage from your Twitter feed there of people rushing out of the area. When you realised that something was happening, what did you see then? Presumably large numbers of police and other emergency services.
You know, right. My office is actually, it's a very nice corner office with a big terrace, with the view directly into Paseo de Gracia and La Plaza Catalunya. So suddenly we heard all this screaming and yelling at people. So we went and rushed to the terrace to see what's happening, and we saw all these people, tourists running with bags, moms, kids, everybody trying to find some shelter in some of the buildings around. So we didn't even know what was happening. We just saw like a massive amount of people trying to cover from something. We heard noise, like we were not sure it was like shots or some type of thing in there, but we didn't know at the moment. Everybody started calling us, and the phone started ringing, and they advised us that like a terrorist attack is secure. We didn't know it was a bomb or what. Suddenly, time passed. We learned basically it was somebody run over some people. That's basically how it happened.
The advice to you in the aftermath was to stay in that office of yours. You've only just been been allowed out.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's we've been under the lock for the past an hour and a half, and just now the police of Catalonia came and say that we need to evacuate immediately. So we just came out of the buildings, and that's how it basically happened. And many people probably, this is an area that is like full of tourists and hotels, so many of the people that are probably, their hotels are over there, they're just there waiting to see when can they cross the area. But it's about like a 4 blocks radio that you're not allowed to get in. Transportation has been shut down, especially subway and the bus system. So if you need to go somewhere, like my case, I need to go home. I need to walk home because there's no transportation available.
And Diana, just in terms of the feel of the city at the moment, of course, as you were mentioning there, a fairly sizable part of it has been cordoned off and evacuated. But where you are now, as it appears that we are getting further away, of course, from the incident itself, are tensions beginning to drop just a little?
Well, it's weird because you don't see. I used to live in New York, so I've seen people getting like very in panic. But here, it's just like if you walk up a couple of blocks, life is a little bit normal. It's just difficult, as I said, to get transportation. But people seem relatively calm. You see in the faces, obviously everybody on their phones with faces of concern and trying to figure out what is next. We don't know if at the end, the thing that we know is that somebody still had like kidnapping some people in a restaurant. So we don't know if that is completely true. We just don't know what it is. And I guess that we all are waiting to see what happens. And we hope that they just capture these guys.
Well, do people in Spanish cities like Barcelona, do they spend much time thinking about the prospect of a terrorist attack such as this? I mean, certainly here in London, it happened, but people do not walk around cowed. They still get on public transport. They still go out and see their friends of an evening. It doesn't change the way that we live our lives here. Do you think it's the same thing in Barcelona?
To tell you the truth, I know that people from different countries that live here, we always felt blessed that things like this never happened in Spain at all. Forget Barcelona, but in general, Spain. So I'm not sure what is going to happen tomorrow. For sure, we're going to be a little bit more conscious about it. We were just happy that we were not touched by terrorism, you know. And Barcelona has become a hub for startups doing many things. For instance, we are in the mobile application business. So you see people from many parts of the world that they not only come for tourism but also for work, because it's a safe place to be, and it's a beautiful place to be. So it's heartbreaking to know that this is happening.
Diana Daniels, many thanks for being with us, and do stay safe.
Thank you.
Let's once again speak to our senior correspondent, David Bowden, who's at the screen and can take us through events as we understand them. It's a difficult picture, isn't it, to keep entirely across, David? We keep getting just fresh snippets of information, fresh bits of footage showing the police operation on the ground.
Yeah, and remember, this is unfolding as we speak, but it's been going on for about 2 hours now. Where are we talking about? Well, of course, we're talking about Barcelona, and it was about 4:30 UK time that the police there then described a massive crash. Note, no talk of terrorism on the initial reports. As we move on, we can go down into the map and find out where all this was happening. It's in Las Ramblas, this big boulevard through the city where largely pedestrianised, but traffic is allowed up both sides. Clearly, that is how this van got into all these people. And we were getting reports pretty quickly of people killed and injured. Then, as we move on and show you more detail, the police finally called it a terror incident. That was the first time we heard the T word. It became clear that this wasn't an accident, that this was something that was orchestrated and a terror incident. And I think if we move on the graphic, we can go right into the La Buquera market. There were reports that there was gunfire from that area. What we can't ascertain, and nobody appears to have ascertained, is whether or not that is true and whether or not that was terrorists firing at police, police firing at terrorists. What we do know subsequently is that the man who was driving the van fled from the scene on foot. And we now think he is one of two men inside a restaurant who are armed. Again, what we don't know is whether or not they have hostages in that restaurant, whether if they do have hostages, there's half a dozen staff, or the place was packed. That sort of information is still being kept from us. What we do know is that whilst the police have cleared the area, and we've seen lots and lots of picture of police cordons going up, we've seen lots of picture of police ushering people away from shops, from cafes, from offices in the immediate area of this restaurant, so they can sanitize it and they can maintain a cordon around where we believe the now two terrorists are holed up. There was some talk earlier about a second van, which may have been a getaway vehicle. It now transpires that that van has been spotted some 40 miles away, so it clearly wasn't the getaway vehicle, but may have something to do with this plot in a more wider sense. So, as we look at this scene now, people clearly largely out of the area, apart from the man with the beard, and we can see police looking fairly relaxed inside that cordon. We've already seen picture from people who were inside their buildings, shooting out of their windows with their cameras, and we've seen armed police moving in alleyways, ushering people out, making sure there was no danger in there, and we now have this situation where police have the area effectively locked down. As we can see now, you can see people, this is earlier from Barcelona, people in alleyways being moved away when it's safe by police, because what they don't want is if this turns nasty and it ends up in a shootout between them and the terrorists, they desperately do not want innocent bystanders in the line of fire, quite literally. So they need to get as many people out of there as possible while they lock it down. And then we move into a phase where somebody has to decide, do we sit and wait for these people to come out or to do something else, Or do we think the situation is so tense that we really need to storm this restaurant and get in there and bring this to a close? But of course, that has the danger of costing other people their lives. Neil.
David, many thanks. Well, we can bring you some pictures now from the immediate aftermath. Now, although we have extensively blurred them, please be aware that they are very graphic indeed. Now, as you can see, people here are very seriously wounded, just lying on the ground. A lot of people, as you can see, helping the wounded, and some people, in fact, you could see at the back of the shot, still running away from the attack. Now, again, some more graphic images here, more seriously injured people, and you have to say that perhaps some of these individuals suffering even worse than that. Everyone surrounded by passers-by trying to help them, many people standing dazed and confused. Now, we are hearing that one suspect may have been arrested. That, according to the Spanish public broadcaster RTVE. Just to reiterate that line, the Spanish public broadcaster RTVE says that one suspect in the attack has been arrested. We're just going to take a look at that. But a little earlier, we spoke to Amar Anwar, a human rights lawyer, caught up in the aftermath of the attack. This is what he had to say about his experience in Barcelona a little earlier on today.
I was about to sit down and have something to eat. The place was jam-packed with thousands of tourists and local people. It was so packed, decided that I would carry on, try and find somewhere quiet, which I have to say is pretty impossible in Las Ramblas because it's a beautiful summer's day, or it was, and it's thousands and thousands of tourists. And like I'd walked on about 5-10 seconds, and the next thing is I hear a crashing noise, then I hear screams, and it was almost like an avalanche. I just saw people, I turned around and looked, and people were running. I started to run. People in front of me started to run. Just hundreds just started running down the street. People were screaming. What stands out for me was this woman who was screaming for her kids because she couldn't see them. And it was a young, I think it was a Bengali man who was running behind me. Eventually I came to stop about 10, 20 seconds probably later, a few hundred metres down, just to see what was happening. And the man had stopped to speak to his friend, and he was speaking away in Bengali. I could understand some of it. I asked him if he spoke Urdu. He then said to me he'd seen a man in the van drive into the crowd, and the guy was very upset because he said he thought 5 or 6 people were very seriously injured. And again, then people started to panic, started to run. The police were instantaneously on the scene. I mean, the scene is heavily policed anyway, by uniformed and by plainclothes officers, but I mean, the area was swamped. Within probably 30 seconds, we had officers out with guns who were very jittery, telling us to move back. There was panic. People were jumping into shops. And then I saw that woman again, the one who'd been screaming for her kids. A police officer took her away, and some of the shopkeepers started pulling up the shutters, and we kept getting pushed back. I'm down now probably about 600 metres away, further on down. As we've been pushed back about 6 times, and I've seen so many ambulances. I mean, every few minutes there's another ambulance goes by, but and I've seen some ambulances going away. So everybody's just shaken and I think horrified. It was just, the place was mobbed. It was just full of thousands of tourists, families and kids. I just stepped into a shop to look at a Barcelona top for my son, thinking I needed to bring him out here. So the kids. So just horrific.
I can understand you. You've been caught up in this event, and where you are, I would be feeling rather nervous and worried myself. I just wondered, we spoke out a little earlier to someone else who was in Barcelona today who suggested that ahead of the incident, even before anything took place, she felt like there was quite a substantial police presence in and around the city centre. What's your view on that?
I don't know. I mean, sadly, the way things are, I would expect there to be substantial police presence in any major city throughout Europe, especially Barcelona, which is, huge tourist attraction. So one would expect it to be. And to be honest, I mean, I came many years ago to Barcelona, probably over a decade ago, but I have to say that, yes, there was a high police presence, but no more than any other major city. And Las Ramblas, anyway, from my understanding, is heavily policed anyway, because one of the advice you're always given is every time when I was coming out here, people were saying, watch out for pickpockets. So there's plainclothes officers and uniform officers. But I think the response from the emergency services within literally 30 seconds, I don't think you can fault the emergency services in the way they responded, but the fact that they did respond in such a heavy manner points towards the fact that either it's a case of they probably, like sadly every other nation in Europe, has had to train for this, that they've trained for this, or they were on a high alert. But I think most nations throughout Europe are on high alert at this point in time, so you would expect the emergency services sadly to have to prepare for something like this. The shocking part, I suppose, that drove it home within the space of a few minutes was that I was just hoping that, if this was a crash or something like that, but the way that the police, emergency services, the helicopters in the sky, the guns, pushing back, and the jitteriness of the police officers, and the fact that there is a search now going on for the individual, for the terrorist, it brought home that, this is a terrorist attack that's taking place.
Well, that was lawyer Amar Anwar describing his experiences very, very close to the initial incident, which Catalan police, for the time being at least, are suggesting killed one individual, has injured at least 32, and of those 32, 10 of them seriously. Well, joining us to discuss this, the security expert Chris Phillips is in the studio with me. Chris, we're here again, aren't we? Once again, someone in a vehicle moving from a road to a pedestrianised area, pavement in the case of London Bridge, here a shopping street. Frankly, I'm surprised that the death toll and the injured is not substantially higher.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no surprise, actually, that it's on the most well-known street in Barcelona because, of course, that will have people from all different nationalities. So it brings the international feel about this. Just as we had in London, a main tourist zone, main tourist area is attacked. And it's such a simple thing to do and almost impossible to stop. But, of course, it's absolutely deadly.
We've heard from Catalan police that there were protocols in place, that they clearly had a plan, and you can understand why, given how regularly we have seen attacks of this type. I mean, what is your assessment of the way in which they've responded?
Well, of course, this street has huge numbers of police officers. It's an actual crime area, high crime area, Les Ramblas, and, of course, there's lots of police officers there. And, of course, with what's happened in Nice and London and Paris and other places, they will also have, hopefully, a decent plan in place to deal with an incident such as this. But, of course, it always takes time. And when something like this happens, potentially the whole thing is over in less than a couple of minutes. So the police to react, even though they're in the same street, is really difficult for them.
And in terms of the operation, it appears, obviously, the immediate reaction is to find out if there is anyone in that van. But very quickly after that, we saw a cordon put in place. What is the purpose of that?
Well, the whole point is to confine the area. So, I mean, actually, that vehicle could have an explosive in it. We don't know. This terrorist could actually have guns. We don't know. So the police officers have got to literally confine that in close location and identify any suspects, whilst being very worried that that vehicle may have explosives in it. So moving people away whilst not allowing the suspect to escape is key.
And again, details very thin on the ground at the moment, but from the footage that we've seen of armed police moving, not at pace, but very slowly through the streets in and around the marketplace, it does appear that we have moved from an incident involving pedestrians on the streets to something of a manhunt. Now, how do you conduct an operation such as that when you don't know who you're looking for or indeed where to find them?
And that's the key point. They don't know who this person looks like. They do have some CCTV there, but not on the same basis as we have in the UK. It's actually identifying that person because, of course, as soon as they jump out the van and jump in amongst the crowds, they could easily be allowed out of the cordon area and away and to escape. So it's really difficult. The police obviously still believe there's a very good chance that that person or those people are still within that area, because they're being very cagey about how they conduct the search of the area. And search they must, and it will take an awful long time to clear an area as big as La Rambla and the surrounding areas.
I'm just looking here at the footage on the screen. Clearly they are moving with some purpose, but these it appear are just ordinary police officers.
Yeah, the police officers in Spain are all armed, of course. Ours aren't. So individually they can go looking for a suspect. It's also interesting, actually, that all the shutters are down on the market, which tends to make you think that the market stallholders had some time to get it down before they evacuated.
Chris, many thanks. We will speak to you again next hour, but the latest from the Spanish city of Barcelona is that a terrorist attack has taken place and at least one person is dead. You're watching Sky News Tonight at 7 o'clock with breaking news from Barcelona. A van has crashed into crowds in the heart of the city's historic Las Ramblas district. Police have confirmed at least one person has died and more than 30 have been injured in what is now being treated as a terrorist attack. Two men, including the driver of the van, have barricaded themselves inside a restaurant. Good evening. Well, as we've been reporting, a van has driven into crowds in Barcelona's Las Ramblas, a famous tourist district. Police say they're treating the incident in the Catalan city as a terrorist attack. At least one person is confirmed dead. Local media has, however, been reporting that the death toll could be as high as 13. Dozens have certainly been injured, including at least 10 of them seriously. The driver of the van and one other individual are said to be holed up inside a restaurant and potentially armed. However, local media is now reporting that one suspect has been arrested. Our senior correspondent, Ian Woods, has the very latest.
Screams, panic, sirens. Victims lying on the ground, bystanders shocked and confused as to what to do to help. The familiar aftermath of a terrorist attack with a vehicle weaponized to kill pedestrians. We've blurred the images of the casualties, but there were many. It looks as if some had been thrown into market stalls by the force of the impact. It appears the white van may have travelled several hundred metres along the city's most popular thoroughfare before finally coming to a halt. Any thought that this could simply be a road traffic accident ended with the sight of armed police swarming through the area looking for suspects. It was late afternoon and the historic Las Ramblas district was packed as usual with locals and tourists. The central strip is pedestrianised, but cars are permitted to travel either side. As the dead and injured lay where they'd been hit, those who'd had a narrow escape tried to get to safety.
All of a sudden, sort of heard a crashing noise and the whole street just started to run. Screaming. I saw a woman next to me screaming for her kids. Police were very, very quickly there. Police officers with guns, vans everywhere, and then the whole street started getting pushed back. You'd see like chaos at the top, like just cars, etc. And couldn't tell what would happen. And then a shopkeeper who was running down this way, the police were pushed. The police officers who got there just started screaming at people to move back, move back.
Suddenly, just people started running towards us, screaming and shouting, "Run, run, run!" So, I grabbed the two girls, and there was an orange phone shop was open. We ran inside, and they locked the doors of the phone shop.
Police ordered nearby metro and train stations to close. It wasn't immediately clear whether this was to avoid people getting in the way of the emergency response, but then came word that one or more suspects may be holed up in a nearby bar. The authorities confirmed it was being treated as a terrorist incident.
I spoke with police who were very nervous and turning tourists away, saying that there's a fugitive on the loose around here and that it was dangerous to stay around.
Catalan police say the death toll is expected to rise. Ian Woods, Sky News.
Well, these are live pictures from the heart of Barcelona, where, as you can see, many police officers still on the streets, and in parts of this, the heart of the city, the evacuation process is still ongoing. Many reports of people still confined to their offices, to their homes, to the many restaurants and bars that are in and around the area. We have heard from the President of the United States in the past couple of minutes, on Twitter, of course. The United States condemns the terror attack in Barcelona, Spain, says the US President, and will do whatever is necessary to help. Donald Trump concludes, "Be tough and strong. We love you." Our senior correspondent David Bowden is at the Sky News Centre and can bring us up to date with what we know.
OK, let's go back to the beginning. We're in Barcelona, of course, we know that. The first we heard that anything was going wrong was at 4:30 UK time, when police confirmed what they called then a massive crash. It was shortly thereafter that we knew that it was in the Las Ramblas area, this huge boulevard that goes all the way through, as you can see there, very wide. It's largely pedestrianised, but there are carriageways up and down for vehicles. Clearly, that's how this van got in there and, of course, damaged so many people. We got reports that people had been killed and injured pretty shortly after the initial report of the massive crash. But then, minutes or so later, we had police calling it a terror attack. And there was also gunfire reported at a nearby La Boquera market. Now, what is unclear is whether or not that report was factual or whether it was somebody mistaken, because we can't ascertain whether or not those were terrorists potentially firing at police, or police at terrorists, or in fact nobody was shooting at anybody. What we do know is that we've now got two armed men thought to be holed up in a Turkish restaurant in that Boquera district. Neil.
David, many thanks. Of course, this is a fast-moving and developing story. There have been pictures emerge from the immediate aftermath of the attack. I should say this, although we have extensively blurred them, please be warned that they are very graphic indeed. Now, as you can see in just a moment, the people in these pictures are very seriously injured and dotted around, of course. A lot of people at the scene staying put and helping the wounded. Some people shown, in fact, still running away from what we believe to be the site of the attack. We have some other pictures as well. A warning again, these are graphic images showing the immediate aftermath of the attack. And yet again, more seriously injured victims, or perhaps even worse. Everyone, though, surrounded by passers-by, not members of the emergency services, just ordinary people who've stopped to try and help. Many others, though, standing looking dazed and confused. Well, as we continue to monitor live pictures from the heart of Barcelona. In a couple of hours ago, I spoke to Amar Anwar. Now, he's a human rights lawyer who was caught up in the aftermath of the attack. He told me what he saw and heard.
I was about to sit down and have something to eat. The place was jam-packed with thousands of tourists and local people. It was so packed, decided that I would carry on, try and find somewhere quiet, which I have to say is pretty impossible in Las Ramblas, because it's a beautiful summer's day, or it was, and it's thousands and thousands of tourists. And like, I'd walked on about 5-10 seconds, and the next thing is I hear a crashing noise, then I hear screams, and it was almost like an avalanche. I just saw people. I turned around and looked, and people were running. I started to run. People in front of me started to run. Just hundreds just started running down the street. People were screaming. What stands out for me was this woman who was screaming for her kids because she couldn't see them. And there was a young, I think it was a Bengali man who was running behind me. Eventually I came to stop about 10, 20 seconds probably later, a few hundred metres down, just to see what was happening. And the man had stopped to speak to his friend, and he was speaking away in Bengali. I could understand some of it. I asked him if he spoke Urdu. He then said to me he'd seen a man in the van drive into the crowd, and the guy was very upset because he said he thought 5 or 6 people were very seriously injured. And again, then people started to panic, started to run. The police were instantaneously on the scene. I mean, the scene is heavily policed anyway by uniformed and by plainclothes officers, but I mean, the area was swamped within probably 30 seconds, we had officers out with guns who were very jittery, telling us to move back. There was panic. People were jumping into shops. And then I saw that woman again, the one who'd been screaming for her kids. A police officer took her away, and some of the shopkeepers started pulling up the shutters, and we kept getting pushed back. I'm down now probably about 600 metres away, further on down. We've been pushed back about 6 times, and I've seen so many ambulances. Every few minutes there's another ambulance goes by, but and I've seen some ambulances going away, so everybody's just shaken and I think horrified. It was just, the place was mobbed. It was just full of thousands of tourists, families and kids. I just stepped into a shop to look at a Barcelona top for my son, thinking I needed to bring him out here, so the kids. So just horrific.
I can understand you. You've been caught up in this event, and where I of the incident, even before anything took place, she felt like there was quite a substantial police presence in and around the city centre. What's your view on that?
I don't know. I mean, sadly, the way things are, I would expect there to be substantial police presence in any major city throughout Europe, especially Barcelona, which is, huge tourist attraction. So one would expect it to be. And to be honest, I came many years ago to Barcelona, probably over a decade ago, but I have to say that, yes, there was a high police presence, but no more than any other major city. And Las Ramblas, anyway, from my understanding, is heavily policed anyway, because one of the advice you're always given is every time when I was coming out here, people were saying, watch out for pickpockets. So there's plainclothes officers and uniform officers. But I think the response from the emergency services within literally 30 seconds, I don't think you can fault the emergency services in the way they responded, but the fact that they did respond in such a heavy manner points towards the fact that either is a case of they probably, like sadly every other nation in Europe has had to train for this, that they've trained for this, or they were on a high alert. But I think most nations throughout Europe are on high alert at this point in time, so you would expect the emergency services sadly to have to prepare for something like this. The shocking part, I suppose, that drove it home within the space of a few minutes was that I was just hoping that, if this was a crash or something like that, but the way that the police, emergency services, the helicopters in the sky, the guns, pushing back, and the jitteriness of the police officers, and the fact that there is a search now going on for the individual, for the terrorist, it brought home that, this is a terrorist attack that's taking place.
Amar Anwar there speaking to us from Barcelona. He'd been in the city, he's a human rights lawyer, he'd been in the city for a conference and found himself caught up in what appears to be a very bloody terrorist incident. Certainly it is being treated as a terrorist incident by Catalan police. We've actually had some updates of significance from the police there. Of course, as we've been reporting, one man linked to the Barcelona attack, we're hearing, has been arrested by the police. But in addition to that, now we have been reporting reports from local media about the possibility of armed individuals making their way into a restaurant or a bar. Catalan police have said in reaction to those reports that there is no one actually at the end point is in custody. No confirmation of that, and certainly do not take it as read. We're also receiving updates from a variety of concerned individuals. Earlier we heard from the Mayor of London, we heard from the President of the United States. We have also heard from Theresa May, the Prime Minister. She said her thoughts are with the victims of the terrible attack in Barcelona, adding this: the UK stands with Spain against terror. Well, let's discuss events in Barcelona and possible implications elsewhere with Chris Phillips, formerly head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office. Chris, it's really good to see you again. Let us start with that latest that we've heard from Catalan police. Local reports suggesting, we could be seeing a death toll into death figures. Officially, though, it remains at 1. The expectation is, however, given just how packed this part of Barcelona is, that will rise.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that's going to be the case. That is one of the most populated, the most people on that street of any in Barcelona and in Europe. So the fact that a vehicle has gone down through the middle of that is almost certainly going to cause a big loss of life.
And we were discussing this as we were listening to Amaranwa, that the fact is that the Catalan police have said there is no one armed or otherwise holed up in a restaurant somewhere in Barcelona. You can understand how quickly nuggets of misinformation make their way into the hands of local media, and it's essentially, as you said, Chinese whispers, isn't it?
Yeah, you'll always get Chinese whispers. Bear in mind that this is a position of chaos with everyone at high stress, and someone tells someone something, and immediately that's a fact. So we have got to bear that in mind. Maybe it was only one person involved in this terrorist attack, but we don't know, and that's something that the police over there are going to have to work hard on, identifying who the suspect is, who his contacts are, just to try and find out whether this is a one-off attack or maybe the start of a series.
Let's talk, shall we, for a moment about what we have seen. And this is a style of attack that we have seen in a variety of locations now around Europe, including, of course, London, the London Bridge attack that then spilled over into Borough Market. We can't protect ourselves entirely against this type of attack, can we?
No, we foresaw that vehicles would be used in terrorist attacks many years ago. In fact, we've had vehicle bombs going off in the UK many times, as they have in Spain, actually. But of course, there's very little that you can do to someone who perhaps gets in a van, even steals a van, drives it down one of the main roads and knocks people over. Even if you put vehicle mitigation measures in on every pavement in the city, in every city, of course people have still got to cross the road, so it's pretty much impossible to have 100% security, which is why we do need the intelligence and the information beforehand to stop them before they get to the van stage.
But it is quite something, isn't it, that we are living in a time when your immediate reaction to hearing that a van has struck pedestrians in any part of Europe is not to think, someone has lost control of a vehicle, perhaps even drink driving. Our first reaction now is to assume this may well be a terrorist attack. We know, of course, that it is. Catalan police say that the individual that they have arrested, they are treating as a terrorist. But in terms of what we have seen, we do understand that Catalan police have protocols in place that they are following. How do you assess their response?
Well, this is one of the most well-policed streets in the world, I should think, because of the high crime rate. So there's never going to be a shortage of police officers in the vicinity. How they manage the situation, we'll have to look at in the future. I'm sure it's very difficult once a vehicle's in motion to bring that vehicle to a halt. And I imagine that this attack probably only lasted for a couple of minutes in total. So we mustn't get into the realms of have they done well, haven't they done well. Sure. We'll find that out when we find out whether this person's been arrested, what his history is, and whether he should have been stopped before that.
Just explain to us, though, that there was clearly a priority for the emergency services there was to establish a cordon, not simply a 50-metre cordon around the vehicle itself, but a fairly substantial cordon in the heart of one of Europe's busiest, most metropolitan cities. What is the thinking, the strategy behind that?
So what you're trying to do is create an island site which you can control. Now, if they were pretty convinced that the terrorist was within that island site, they knew that that terrorist would have to come out and hopefully be arrested as they came out. Of course, with a situation like this, usually it takes 20 minutes to form this cordon, but because of the street it was, I think they were able to do it very quickly, which may be the reason that they've managed to catch this terrorist. But the whole point is that you don't know exactly what the threat is. That vehicle could still be a threat. It could still have explosives in it. There could be other people in the van. There may be another van involved. So the police have to work on these assumptions and make sure that they protect and control the area that the threat is in.
How does one practice for an event such as this? Do you have, essentially, do you take over a section of a town and run essentially a role-playing exercise? Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly the firearms officers in the UK do this on a regular basis. They will do house-to-house search in practice. And we are lucky in the UK. We've got a fairly small number of armed officers, but they're very highly trained. Of course, in other countries where every officer has to carry a gun, they have less training. They can be, I wouldn't say untrained, but very much less trained than our specialists. And so what you'll see is people pulling their revolvers out, as an example, in order to protect themselves if they see someone. Of course, you wouldn't have that in the UK. You'd rely on a response and officers coming in with guns.
I mean, is there an argument then in the United Kingdom? The footage we're looking at the moment are clearly armed response officers. They're carrying their rifles rather than the sidearms that you would see from ordinary police officers. But the two gentlemen that we're looking at the moment are carrying sidearms. Is there now an argument that we would given the frequency with which we're seeing incidents such as this take place, is there an argument for having more weapons on the streets of London?
I think I'm of an age and of an era, I think, that says the less guns you have on the streets, the less people will be shot. However, I think circumstances may push us down that route, particularly if these terrorist attacks carry on. And it was said only just a few days ago by the ex-head of MI5 that this is a 20 or 30-year problem that we've got in front of us. And you can expect to see the terrorist attacks alter, change, and unfortunately will almost certainly get worse. I mean, however bad this is, it could have been so much worse if the vehicle was containing explosives. It's as simple as that. And we have to bear in mind that this is a evolving threat and one that we have to give our police officers the right protection.
Still, one imagines that in Barcelona there will be, as there has been in the aftermath of the London Bridge attack, a reappraisal of what measures can be put in place to try and guard against incidents of this type. I mean, what can be done? You can't guard against the risk 100%, but there are some steps that you can
Well, I can tell you what we did in 2005 in the UK, because I think that's a good way to look at this. What we did, we risk assessed and analysed the most likely targets for terrorists. And actually, if you look at the terrorist attacks that have taken place in London and other places, they would all certainly have been up at the top end of the spectrum of likely targets. And then you put defensive measures in those locations. Now, some of those defensive measures may be just the inability to get
on Twitter, signalling that indeed the figure that we're hearing from the Catalan police and that we are hearing now from a local government official. Presumably, there are different processes to be followed by the police force.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, they don't want to commit themselves to people, the numbers too early, because, of course, the numbers can go up and down. And they don't actually know where the victims, many of the victims may have gone. Some will have gone to different hospitals. So they're trying to get this information together. And the one thing that you don't want to do in an incident like this is put out inaccurate figures. So the police will be working overtime to try and make sure that they can identify exact numbers that they can definitely say that person's dead, that person's injured. And bringing that together is something that takes a few hours.
Indeed. Well, again, just to remind you as to the very latest that we've heard, a Catalan government official has now said on Twitter 13 people have been killed as a result of the incident in Las Ramblas. At least 50 injured, and earlier we heard at least 10 of that number seriously injured. And again, just to remind you as to the information that has been emerging in the past few moments, one individual, we are told by Catalan police, is now in custody, and earlier reports of two people, armed or otherwise, being holed up in a bar somewhere. Catalan police telling us that is simply not the case. As I was mentioning a little earlier, we heard from Jim Kent from Barcelona. Barcelona City FM, who was on Las Ramblas just a few minutes after the incident took place.
We were at the base of Las Ramblas, so we are backwards to the Mediterranean, looking up the Las Ramblas. When we arrived 20 minutes after the incident. It was very deserted of the many thousands of people that would normally be there. We heard from an eyewitness that confirmed it was a white Mercedes transit van that had driven approximately maybe 150, 200 meters down Las Ramblas, down the pedestrianised part of the centre. And then initially, well, you're as up to date as we are on the number of fatalities. Subsequently, we also got messages. There's a WhatsApp message being sent around Barcelona about this hunt for the second white van that was rented, apparently by the same person that rented the initial van. And that message has been distributed on now Spanish media as well. At the base of Las Ramblas, where we are, there was at least maybe 8 or 9 ambulances that are waiting. With a team of maybe 40 paramedics, not clear what they're waiting for. But they were not rushing to attend injured. It seemed as though they had another objective, or maybe perhaps just being prepared for the worst. In terms of the people running away, as you mentioned, we also heard stories of the 2 people running away. The hostage incident, that's currently a little bit unclear what was happening. That's at the other end of Las Ramblas from where we are, so I can't provide any other insights into that. Other than to say, we understand that the manhunt is continuing for the perpetrators.
Just describe for us, if you can, I mean, how busy would that pedestrianised area have been? Where we're hearing from Catalan police, 32 people have been injured, 10 of them seriously. I mean, that, in any town centre, that would be a significant number, but it would appear that there must have been hundreds of people milling around this particular part of Barcelona at that time.
Correct. There would definitely have been hundreds of people. So, in fact, in some ways, maybe 1 or 2 small mercies that it wasn't worse than what you're describing there. I mean, I understand that after the impact, there was a very loud bang when the van came to a halt, and that also triggered many people to run away from the incident, obviously in fear, as in they weren't clear exactly what that bang was.
At first glance, it appears that Barcelona has been pretty well prepared for an incident such as this. The police force telling us that they pretty quickly enacted the protocols that were in place. You've been there for a lot longer. Just tell us, John, in terms of... Sorry, Jim, just tell us, how does it look to a bystander? The police have clearly been planning for something like this.
Sorry, I only just half heard you there because I've got some police noise behind me. But as far as I understand, generally, Spain does take terrorism seriously. There's a lot of armed police on the streets. So in terms of uniform protection, that's something that you have to say that they are prepared in that sense. Of course, they do have 4 different police forces governing it. Sometimes there can be interesting discussions about which police force has jurisdiction over what particular event. But nevertheless, I think you'd have to say, from what we can see, the police have responded quickly. And as I speak to you, more ambulances are arriving as I speak to you here at the base of Las Ramblas.
Jim, we've had some detail coming predominantly from El País newspaper about a second van, that there was some involvement of another vehicle. Do you know anything about that?
Well, all I know is that I, along with many other people, we received a WhatsApp message that the police were looking for a second white van, and a registration number was distributed with that description, asking people to look out for it. But that's as much as I know.
We'll continue to keep an eye on these live pictures from the heart of Barcelona as the sun starts to head down there. We have been hearing from a number of political figures in the aftermath of the incident in Barcelona. The very latest of those, the US Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, has been offering America's support to Spain. He was speaking to the media alongside his Japanese counterpart in Washington. Both condemned the attack in Barcelona.
We offer our condolences to the loss of life and the injuries that have occurred to so many innocent people yet again. We will continue to monitor the situation. We stand ready to assist law enforcement, national security authorities in Spain, our consulates in Barcelona, and our entire Mission Spain team are currently assisting Americans in Spain who are affected by these events. We ask U.S. citizens in the area to let your loved ones know you are safe. Terrorists around the world should know the United States and our allies are resolved to find you and bring you to justice.
The US Secretary of State there repeating the advice from the State Department. American citizens being advised by their equivalent of the Foreign Office, the same advice as the FCO, to stay indoors and to stay away from the Las Ramblas district. We've also now heard in just the past couple of minutes from Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor. She has said the following. In fact, she says that Barcelona is a revolting attack. We'll have more